Tem, now, Fenoiten, Du, Rachel, Sandra, Marcus, Patricia, Claire, Daniel, Megan, Jess, Nora, Gary, Lily, Kevin, Amber, Evelyn, Dwight, Harriet, Owen, Dale, Vivian, Leah, Patrick, Britton, Connor, Tessa, Philip, Nadia, Wenner, Troy, April, Callie, Renee, Walter, Fiona, Brender, Terry, Marlene, Nathan, Garrett, Simone, Ivy, Priya, Cole, Hazel, Demi, Cora, Jolene, Frank, Mona, Terrell, Lena, Scott, Dad, Dev, Zoe, Rosario, Daphne. Temtem huh? Some hai hun tasan chum chuan, hun fewer than hoop. When I was 9 years old, I broke my wrist at recess. A kid pushed me off the monkey bars, not on purpose, just one of those chaotic playground moments. And I landed on my right hand. I remember sitting on the blacktop holding my arm against my chest, watching the other kids keep running and laughing like nothing happened. A teacher eventually noticed me and walked me to the nurse's office. My parents were called. My mother showed up 40 minutes later. She walked in, looked at my swollen wrist, and the first thing she said was, "Where's your jacket? I told you to wear the blue one today." I didn't say anything, I just nodded. My dad arrived right behind her. He patted my head, signed the paperwork, and on the way to the urgent care clinic, they spent the entire car ride on the phone with my aunt, talking about something my sister had done in dance class that morning. Something cute. Something worth repeating twice. That was the day I learned something that took me 20 more years to fully understand. I could be sitting on the ground with a broken bone and my family would still find a way to make the moment about Junie. My sister Juniper, Junie, everyone calls her, is 4 years younger than me. She has always been the one my parents rearranged their schedules for, the one they drove 3 hours to see in a community theater production that lasted 45 minutes. The one whose college application essays my mother proofread 4 times, while mine sat in my email unopened, for 2 weeks until I stopped sending them all together and figured it out myself. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I do not think my parents are evil people. I've spent a long time sitting with that question, and the honest answer is no. They are not cruel. They are not malicious. They are just 2 people who, for reasons I'll probably never fully understand, decided early on that one of their daughters needed more. And the one who needed less? That was always going to be me. I'm the responsible one. I hear that word and my stomach still tightens a little. Responsible. Like it's a compliment. Like it doesn't actually mean, we knew you'd be fine on your own, so we didn't bother. I graduated high school with a 3.9 GPA. I paid for most of my college through scholarships and a part-time job at a coffee shop that required me to be there at 5 a.m. 3 days a week. I graduated in 4 years, moved to a city 4 hours away, got a decent job at a mid-size accounting firm, and built something quiet and functional and mine. My own apartment. A savings account I was genuinely proud of. A routine that worked. Junie, meanwhile, bounced between majors 3 times, transferred schools once, and graduated a year late. My parents covered every tuition bill without complaint, every apartment deposit, every plane ticket home for every holiday. Once, when she was 22, she called crying because she'd overdrafted her account and couldn't pay her car insurance, and my dad wired her $400 within the hour. When I was 22, I got a flat tire on the highway in the middle of a rainstorm and called my dad in a panic. He told me to call AAA and hung up within 30 seconds because he was watching a game. I have no idea when I stopped keeping score. Somewhere around 26, I think. I'd had a long conversation with my therapist about it, about how exhausting it was to carry the running tally in my head, all the moments stacked up against each other, and she asked me to try something. She asked me to just let the tally go, not to forgive, not to pretend the pattern didn't exist, just to stop counting, to stop waiting for it to balance out. I tried. I got pretty good at it. And then last November happened. I had been dealing with a kidney issue for about 8 months. Nothing dramatic at first. Just a dull ache in my lower back, some fatigue, the kind of symptoms that are easy to explain away when you're busy and slightly in denial. My doctor found elevated levels at a routine appointment in March and referred me to a specialist. By August, we were talking about a procedure, a minimally invasive surgery to deal with a blockage that had been quietly getting worse. I scheduled it for November 14th, a Thursday. I'd arranged everything myself. Time off work approved. A car service booked to take me home afterwards since I couldn't drive. A neighbor I barely knew but who had offered once to help with anything just in case. I called my mother in early October. Not to ask her to come. I want to be honest about that. I called because she's my mother and I thought she should know. I told her the surgery date, what it involved, that the recovery would be about a week, that I'd be fine. She said, "Oh, honey, that sounds scary." Then she said, "Hold on," and I heard her call to my dad in the other room about something unrelated. She came back and said she'd have to look at the calendar because Junie was coming home that weekend for her birthday. Junie's birthday is November 17th. The surgery is on the 14th, I said. I'll be home recovering by the time she gets there. Right, my mother said. I just mean it might be complicated. I said it was fine. I told her I'd figured it out. I said goodbye. My dad called me 2 days later. He didn't mention the surgery at all. He called to tell me that Junie had gotten a promotion at her job and they were thinking of taking her out to dinner to celebrate when she came home. Did I want to try to come down for that? I said I'd probably still be recovering from my surgery. There was a pause. Right, he said. Totally forgot about that. When is that again? I told him. Again, okay, he said. Well, feel better. That was the last conversation I had with either of them before I went in for surgery. The procedure went fine. I was under general anesthesia for about an hour and a half. When I woke up in the recovery room, there was a nurse adjusting something on my IB line, and the clock on the wall said 2047 in the afternoon. I had a text from Tara, my best friend who lives in Denver and had been threatening to fly out, which I told her was unnecessary, that said, "You better text me the second you wake up or I'm calling the hospital." There was a text from my neighbor saying she was available whenever I needed a ride home. There was nothing from my parents. I told myself that was fine. I had told them I had it handled. I had been the one who made it clear I didn't need them. I discharged myself around 5 p.m. My neighbor picked me up, and I was back in my apartment by 6, propped up on the couch with a prescription and strict orders to rest. Tara video called me at 6:30. We talked for an hour. She made me laugh 3 times, which hurt a little but was worth it. After we hung up, I lay in the dim light of my living room and waited for my phone to show me something from my family. By 9 p.m., I had gotten a text from my mother. It said, "How was the surgery?" Junie says hi. We're at dinner for her birthday thing, came a few days early. Call when you can. I read it 4 times. November 14th, a Thursday. They had driven to Junie City, not mine, Junie City, 4 hours in the opposite direction to start her birthday celebration early. On the day I had surgery. I want to tell you I handled it with grace. I want to tell you I put the phone down and went to sleep and processed it slowly and calmly over the following days. Instead, I lay there and cried until I fell asleep. And when I woke up the next morning, something felt different. Not broken. Not angry, exactly. Just finished. Like a part of me that had been holding on to something finally opened its hand and let go. The recovery week was quiet. Tara called every day. My neighbor brought over soup on day 3, which made me cry in a completely different way. I went back to work the following Wednesday, a day earlier than recommended, because I was going stir-crazy and my boss, Mr. Bassett, had already said he'd work around whatever I needed. My mother called on day 5. She asked how I was feeling. She told me the birthday dinner had been lovely. She mentioned, somewhat casually, that Junie's boyfriend might be proposing soon and wasn't that exciting. She asked if I'd be coming home for Thanksgiving. I said I didn't think so. She sounded surprised. "May, you always come home for Thanksgiving." "I know," I said. "I think I need to do something different this year." There was a silence. Then she said, "Is everything okay?" And I said, "I'm still recovering from surgery, Mom." Another silence. "Right," she said. "Of course." I don't think she heard the weight in that. I don't think she understood what I was actually saying. And that was okay. That was actually the moment I understood something important. She was not going to hear it. Not in a phone call. Not in a passing conversation. Not ever, probably. Unless I gave her no other option. I started writing the letter that night. I want to be clear about why I chose a letter over a conversation. I've had people ask me that, and the honest answer is this. I have spent my entire life being talked over, talked around, and talked past. In a conversation, there are interruptions. There are pivots. There are the particular skills my mother has always had for steering difficult moments into safer water, for making it somehow end up about her feelings, her effort, how hard she tried. A letter cannot be interrupted. A letter says exactly what it means to say and then stops. I needed something that couldn't be redirected. I wrote it over 3 nights. I revised it probably 15 times. I cut things that were too sharp, not because I didn't mean them, but because sharp things make people defensive, and I didn't want them to defend themselves. I wanted them to understand. The final version was 4 pages. I printed it, sealed it in an envelope, and mailed it the Saturday before Thanksgiving, timed so they'd receive it around the time they'd normally expect me to show up at the door. The letter said this: I have spent most of my life being the daughter you didn't worry about. I understood, even when I was young, that you saw me as capable, self-sufficient, low maintenance, fine. I think you meant that as a compliment. I think you believed it was a good thing, that I required less from you. What I needed you to know, what I have needed you to know for a very long time, is that I required less because I learned to require less, not because I needed less, because asking and being overlooked felt worse than not asking at all. I had surgery on November 14th. You knew the date. You drove to see Junie that same day. I'm not asking you to feel guilty about Junie's birthday. That's not what this is. I'm asking you to understand what that meant to me, to sit with that for a moment. Your daughter was in a hospital and you were at dinner with your other daughter. I came home alone. I recovered alone. And you texted me from a restaurant. I'm 31 years old and I still catch myself hoping you'll notice. That's the part that exhausts me the most. Not the missing, but the hoping. I'm writing this letter because I want to stop hoping. Not because I've stopped loving you. I haven't. I'm writing it because I need to start treating myself the way I've always wished you would treat me. Like I matter. Like I'm worth showing up for. I love you. I do. But I'm going to pull back for a while. Not to punish you. I need you to understand that. This isn't punishment. This is me, finally, taking care of myself the way I should have a long time ago. I'm not asking for anything. I'm just asking you to know. May, I mailed it. And then, I drove to Tara's in Denver for Thanksgiving, the first one I'd spent away from home in 31 years, and I sat at her parents' table and ate their food and laughed at stories I hadn't heard before, and it felt like breathing in a room with the windows open. My mother called on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, probably the day the letter arrived. I didn't answer. She called again on Thanksgiving morning. I texted back, "Happy Thanksgiving, I'm with friends, talk soon." She texted, "We got your letter. Dad and I want to talk when you're ready." I said, "I know, I'll reach out when I'm ready." My dad texted separately that evening. His message said, "May, I didn't realize. I'm sorry." 5 words. Probably the most direct apology I have ever received from my father in my entire life. I read it standing in Tara's kitchen and I had to put my phone face down on the counter and take a minute. Because here's the thing about finally being seen. It doesn't feel like winning. It doesn't feel triumphant or satisfying in the way you imagine it might when you're lying in a dim apartment the night after surgery, reading a text from a restaurant. It feels quiet. A little sad. Like being handed something you needed a very long time ago, offered gently. Too late to change everything but still. Offered. I didn't respond to my dad's text that night. I waited 3 days, and then I called him. It was a long conversation. The longest we'd had in years, maybe ever. He talked about things I hadn't expected. About how they'd always seen me as the strong one, and how he understood now that strong didn't mean needing nothing. He talked about Junie in a way that was honest. More honest than I expected. That she had always seemed to need more reassurance, that they'd gotten used to directing attention where it seemed most urgent, and that at some point, they'd stopped asking if I was urgent too. He said he was sorry. He said it more than once. I told him I believed him. I also told him that sorry didn't immediately fix 22 years of patterns and that I needed us to do something different going forward, not just acknowledge what had happened and go back to normal. He said he understood. My mother was harder. She is always harder. She did some of the things I expected. There were tears and some moments where she pivoted toward her own feelings about what the letter meant for her. And I had to navigate that carefully, hold my ground without being harsh. But she got there, slowly. By the end of the call, she had said something I had not expected. I think I knew. I think I knew it wasn't fair, and I told myself you were okay with it. That was easier for me. I'm sorry I let it be easier. That undid me a little. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. I didn't go home for Christmas. That was my own choice, not a punishment. I just needed the slower reintroduction, the longer runway. We talked on Christmas morning, all three of us on a video call, and it was awkward and warm and strange in equal parts. Junie was there briefly. She looked uncomfortable, which told me the letter had been discussed. She didn't say anything directly to me, and I didn't push. I've talked to my parents most weeks since then. It's different. Not fixed. I want to be realistic about that, because I think realistic is what actually helps people. Patterns that took 22 years to build don't dissolve in 2 months of phone calls. But there are moments. My mother called me last month just to ask how work was going. Not because Junie had done something notable. Not because there was a holiday or an event. Just to ask. And my dad texted me a photo of something that reminded him of me. A news article about an accounting software company, which is genuinely the most dad thing imaginable, and I laughed out loud in my car and sent back 3 exclamation points. Small things. Tentative things. I'll take them. The lesson, if there is one, if I'm allowed to offer one after all of this, is not that you should send a letter or stop going home for the holidays or pull back from people who have disappointed you. Everyone's situation is different. Everyone's family is its own particular math problem. My path was mine. The thing I want to say, the thing I wish someone had said to me about 10 years earlier is this. Being low maintenance is not a personality trait you were born with. It is a coping strategy you developed in a specific environment. And at some point you are allowed to stop coping and start asking. Not because the people in your life will necessarily respond the way you hope, but because you deserve to find out what happens when you stop making yourself smaller. I spent 31 years being the daughter who didn't need anything. I had surgery in a hospital and came home alone and lay on my couch while my family was at a birthday dinner in another city. And then I wrote a letter, not to burn anything down, not out of rage, just to say, I was here. I needed something and I needed you to know. That felt in the end like enough. Not everything, but enough. I've thought a lot about why it took me 31 years to do something as simple as tell the truth. The honest answer is that I didn't think I was allowed to. Not because anyone told me that directly. No one ever sat me down and said, May, your feelings don't count. It was quieter than that. It was my dad hanging up in 30 seconds when I had a flat tire in the rain. It was my mother saying, I just mean it might be complicated, when I told her I was having surgery. It was 1,000 small moments that individually could each be explained away, but stacked together over decades became something I just accepted as the shape of my life. I was the one who was fine. And because I was fine, no one asked if I was. That's the thing about being capable. People stop checking on you, and somewhere along the way, you stop asking them to. What I understand now, what I wish I could go back and tell the 9-year-old version of me sitting on that blacktop holding her broken wrist, is that the way people treat you is not a verdict on your worth. It is a reflection of their habits, their blind spots, the stories they tell themselves about who needs what. My parents didn't fail to show up at the hospital because I mattered less. They failed to show up because they had practiced for 31 years not having to. I had made it easy. I had been so relentlessly self-sufficient that they genuinely believed I didn't need them there. And the awful part is, I had almost started to believe it too. Writing that letter was not an act of anger. I want to be clear about that, because I think people hear I sent my parents a hard letter and didn't go home for the holidays, and they assume rage. There was no rage. There was something more like grief, and underneath the grief, a very quiet kind of clarity. I finally understood that I could not keep absorbing the cost of their inattention and calling it strength. That was not strength. That was just a very old, very tired form of self-erasure. The cause and the effect are not always immediate. My parents didn't receive one dramatic consequence for 31 years of overlooking me. What happened was slower and more honest than that. Over time, the weight of the imbalance simply became too much for one person to keep carrying alone. That's how it always works. Not with a lightning bolt, with a letter. With a daughter who finally stops showing up the way everyone expects her to, and starts asking whether the expectation was fair in the first place. My dad's 5-word text. I didn't realize. I'm sorry. Taught me something I hadn't expected to learn. Accountability doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives in small, plain sentences from people who genuinely did not see what they were doing. That doesn't make the years easier, but it makes the path forward possible. I'm still figuring out what my family looks like now. It's tentative and imperfect and nothing like I used to imagine it would be. But it is honest in a way it never was before. And I have learned, slowly, the hard way, the only way anything real is ever learned, that honesty, even when it costs you a holiday, even when it arrives 4 pages long in a sealed envelope, is always the beginning of something better than pretending.